welcome back to another episode of the Property Source and Success Show, and I am fresh off the back of sending my son back to school. He was sick the last couple of days. Actually, yesterday he was off school sick, 9 years old, high temperature, fever, shivers, roasting 1 minute, stomach bug, and everything that goes along with that. And yes, it was incredibly inconvenient. I had meetings in the diary yesterday. I had plans for yesterday. I had things booked in to get done yesterday, most notably my hair. But all of that went and if I'm honest, it reminded me of something that I don't think we talk about enough. But I think it's important to talk about it because I didn't build my property business, which started from property sourcing. I didn't build it 9 years ago because I wanted a fancy lifestyle. In fact, I couldn't give a flying about a fancy lifestyle. I built it because, to be perfectly honest, I was sick of permission-based living and asking for permission. In my old corporate job, having a sick child didn't just change the course of your day. It came with judgment. It came with guilt. It came with the anxiety. And sometimes, that horrible feeling of having to justify being a parent because you needed to take a day off to stand in, to look after them. And look, if you've worked a corporate job or if you're currently working in a corporate job, you will know exactly what I mean. I'll never forget in my old corporate job, when I was heavily pregnant, letting the manager know or asking him if I could attend my maternity leave appointment that was coming up later on in that week. And he looked at me dead square in the eyes and said, well, that's extremely inconvenient for us. And I thought, wow, I remember that. I will never forget that. Obviously, I went to the appointment anyway, but I went feeling really small. Like I was letting the team down. It was coming up to month end. I'm a financial analyst by trade. They needed me. It was just a nightmare. So if you've worked in corporate or you're working in corporate, you know exactly what I mean by this. And you're not just thinking to yourself, my child is unwell. You immediately default into thinking, how do I word this to the boss so that it sounds acceptable? Who's going to be annoyed about me having to take a day off to look after my sick child? What are they going to say when I'm not there? Always a particular favourite of mine. Will this make me look unreliable? And the worst part is, sometimes nobody even says anything out loud. It's the eye rolls, it's the muttering under the breath, it's the general vibe that you get that you have upset the apple cart. And asking for time off doesn't feel like a normal thing. It feels like you're asking them for a favour. And that used to send me into serious anxiety. And it wasn't because I wasn't good at my job. I was very good at my job. But it was because the system was built around control. They controlled my time. They controlled my availability, control of your professionalism, as if being a mum is unprofessional. And that's really what I mean by permission-based living. It's when your life has to fit around somebody else's rules. You can be talented, you can be skilled, you can be hardworking, you can be reliable. But the moment that a real life event shows up in your working environment, like a sick child, like an appointment, like a family emergency, it becomes a problem. But freedom-based living is completely different. Completely different. And that's, is this a bit of a side rant today? I suppose it is, but I think it's important that we talk about it. Freedom-based living is, look, I can still handle my responsibilities, but I don't need permission to live my life. And so my son being off school sick the past couple of days is a perfect example. And that's really what spurred me in to this kind of ad hoc freestyle podcast today. Because yesterday I had to reshuffle. Some meetings that I had pre-planned, some of them weeks in advance, had to be rescheduled. Some I could still facilitate because I had the option to take them over Zoom calls. Fantastic. And in between doing all of that and, running a business, I could still look after my son. I didn't have any guilt. I didn't have any anxiety. I didn't have any stress about what people were thinking. I didn't have to rehearse my explanation to the boss and try to justify why I needed a day at home to look after a sick child. And it's important that we talk about this because it's true. And controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyway, 9 times out of 10, that responsibility of staying at home to look after a sick child often falls on the mother. I am sorry, fathers who are listening to this. And yes, I know there is a small contingent where that responsibility will fall on you, but 90% of the time, that responsibility falls on the woman. And I want you to hear this clearly. It isn't about doing nothing. It isn't about never working, having your own business. It's about options. And options are the thing that the corporate environment doesn't give you. Options were the thing that my corporate job didn't give me. So this is for the person listening to this podcast right now. You're tuning in. Maybe you're in a corporate role. Maybe you're not in a corporate role, but you're doing well on paper. You're competent. You're probably the one people can rely on, but you're probably tired. And maybe even more than that, you're not just tired, but you're boxed in. You might not even realize how permission-based your life has become until something happens. And I understand this better than anybody. When you live in a permission-based environment, from an employment perspective, you plan your life around your calendar, not your values. You feel guilty for having your own needs. You feel anxious when life throws a curveball like a sick child. You will tolerate stress that you would never accept in any other area of your life. And frankly, it chips away at you bit by bit by bit. It is soul destroying because you start living your job and your job becomes the main character in your life. And then everything outside of the job is a bit of a side plot. And that's really, I know this boils down to, this is exactly why 9 years ago I opted for the route of property sourcing. Clearly over the last 9 years, things have expanded and grown. And, not only did it start with property sourcing, but then that led on to raising private investor finance, which led to building a significant buy-to-let portfolio, which led to, having a consistent rental income, which led to, commercial to residential developments, which led to obviously our education mastermind, our six-figure sourcing mastermind. But it started with sourcing. And when it's done properly, it is a route to build income that gives you control over your time. And this is so important that I want you to hear this today. It is not passive and it is not quick. And I am not here to sell you a fantasy. But what I can tell you is it is flexible. It is flexible. And flexibility is the very thing that creates breathing space. It's what lets you build your life and build your daily schedule around if you needed to stay home to look after a sick child, which I did yesterday. You don't go into a downward spiral. You don't start begging a boss for a day off and you don't feel like you've committed a crime, because frankly, that's how I used to feel when I would ask for appointments when I worked in a corporate job. Like I had committed a crime. Like I was asking my boss if I could have his child's kidney. But when you have your own business, and for mine, it started with sourcing, you just adjust and you carry on. So here's the question I want to leave you with, because I appreciate today's podcast is less on the tactical strategy side and more on the benefits in your life that you maybe need to be looking towards. I want to ask you this question. If your child needed a day off school sick tomorrow, if your mum needed you, kind of last minute, or if life threw something unexpected at you, would you have options? Or would you have to ask for permission? Because that is the difference, guys. Permission-based living keeps you anxious. It keeps you boxed in. It keeps you on the hamster wheel. Freedom-based living gives you the room to breathe because you have options, you have freedom, you have flexibility. Am I selling you the dream here? No. You will get exactly out of this what you put into it. It just so happens that I rolled up my sleeves 9 years ago and I said, I am done with this corporate. And that's what brought me the freedom and flexibility. You work hard enough, it pays off. And if this is hit home, if you're listening to this podcast today and it's hit home, here's what I want you to know. You don't need to burn your life down. And I certainly do not want you to quit your job tomorrow. But you can start building something alongside it that gives you options. Important. Okay? So listen to what I'm saying. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. I don't recommend it. You absolutely can start building something alongside it that gives you the options. And if you want to learn how to start property sourcing properly, or if you want to learn how to grow maybe a property sourcing business that you've already started to try and get off the ground, and you want to learn how to do it properly with a plan that can fit around real life, find me on social media. I'm on Instagram. I am Danielle Bell Property. I am on Facebook, Danielle Bell, and just message me the word freedom and I will point you in the right direction based on where you are at. On that note, guys, I hope this episode has been useful, a bit of a different one today. Share it with someone that you think needs to hear it, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.